Very good afternoon to all. We are here to study Unit 3 for International Business Management, and the name of this unit is Strategy Making and International Business. Now, if we talk about the first topic which we intend to study is the structure of global organizations. This topic is something which is very important and can be asked in your NTEM examination as a long answer question too. Now, if we talk about structure, this particular word, it basically defines any kind of a formal setup which we have for any kind of organization which intends to describe the superior subordinate relationship and at the same time helps us to formalize the channels of communication and predicts the levels of management. So all in all, if I talk about structure, it needs to provide a clarity regarding the fact that what are the major tasks in any organization and who all are the people who will be responsible for these tasks. Now, if we talk about the essentials of organizational structure, there are two basic elements which are kind of important here: the height and the width of the structure. The height would mean elements which would comprise of the layers, as in if we talk about large organizations, they would eventually have large hierarchies in comparison to a very small organization. Whereas when we are talking about width, it precisely means the kind of centralization and decentralization which we have. Centralization means that you are trying to have the entire autonomy with you at the top level management, and you do not allow subsidiary companies in the host countries to take decisions at their own end. Whereas decentralization would mean that the subsidiary companies in the host countries to a very greater extent are allowed to take decisions whenever required. Now, when we talk about decentralization and centralization, I cannot say the either of them is correct, as in a balance has to be maintained, right? If I talk about any organization which is good for it, centralization or decentralization completely depends upon the kind of product they are dealing into, the kind of geography they are dealing into, right? So combination of that has to be identified for any organization and is kind of a subjective thing from organization to organization also. Now, the next topic which we intend to cover is the basic approaches to the formation of organization structure, right? Now, this can also be defined as the factors influencing structure of global firms. The modes of entry is the first one. The way an enterprise is starting its operations in an economy is kind of different the way it started off in some another prior economy. For example, they would want to establish an export firm or export department first, then eventually grow it into an international firm, then eventually into a multinational firm, right? So these particular steps may not be the same every time when they are entering into a new country. So the kind of organizational structure which would be there in, for example, an international firm would be different from a multi-domestic firm. So that is the point. Second is external environment. External environment basically comprises of your economical, political, legal and social environment, which becomes kind of an important variant in defining the organizational structures. The third one which we have is the overall objectives. The overall objectives for any organization in the long run is profit maximization, wealth maximization, survival and growth, right? These kind of motives of any organization to a greater extent are again helping determine the structures better. The next we have is the nature of the business. The nature basically comprises of the number and the type of business which we are dealing into, right? Number over here would mean the transactions, the kind of widespread which we have, and the type would mean maybe a product based or a service based. So to a greater extent, these factors might define the structure of the organization. Next we have the organizational climate. The organizational climate includes parameters like teamwork, commitment, participation, conflict, resolution, trust and so on. Now when we are talking about management style, it is basically a factor which is majorly attributing to the management, which means that if the management is willing to have a complete centralized role, or are they willing to have a decentralized kind of a role in terms of autonomy. Next, we have the size of the enterprise. Size of the enterprise to a very greater extent has an effect on the structure. If I talk about Coca-Cola as a company, the organizational structure which they will be having will be quite different from the one which a MSME organization might be having. Now, the next set of thing which we need to cover is the types of organization structures. The first two, that is the global functional structure and the global product division structure, will be covered in this video in detail. The next four, that is global area structure, strategic business unit structure, global matrix structure and global network structure, will be something which will be covered in the following videos in detail. The first one which we have is the global functional structure. In the global functional structure, basically the first set of classification which we have is on the basis of operations, which can be like HR, marketing, finance, R&D and so on. Over here, if you see the diagram, we have made the classification on the basis of R&D, marketing and operations. On a whole, if I try to speak on this aspect is, if I talk about the global marketing department, this global marketing department would be basically responsible for managing the overall operations in terms of marketing of either of the products which are manufactured by this company, right? And at the same time ensuring the marketing operations all over the world. Maybe that particular firm is into operations in Europe, into Asia and so on, but this global marketing firm department would be responsible for the operations all throughout the world. Now, when we talk about the advantages and disadvantages, the advantages are as follows. Now, centralization further increases optimization and efficiency, that can be easily predicted. The second one which we talk about is the economies of scale benefit which might be there. The third is duplication of effort is avoided. Now, if we talk about these organizational structure which we are studying, right, the global functional structure, this is precisely being followed by companies which are either into the oil industry, either into the basic chemical industry, car manufacturing corporations and etc. Now, when we talk about the disadvantages might be, it kind of leads to inflexibility, right? You cannot take the customization from one basic area into consideration because the operations are being handled centrally at one place, right? On and all, we can also say that there can be a chance of increase in bureaucracy and eventually employees not taking much initiatives because they somehow know that even if we are able to initiate something, approvals are something which are subject to the headquarters, which might not be approved, which might lead to a dissatisfaction amongst them eventually. Now, the next structure which we intend to study is global product division structure. Now, this particular structure is extensively used in corporates where we have multiple product lines. For example, if we have a firm which is having first category of product as cosmetics, second category of products as medicine, third category of products as garments, and the fourth category as footwear. Now, how will the further classification be done? Now, product A is cosmetic. Under this category product A, you will have the various functionalities. In terms of product A, cosmetics would have their own production, would have their own purchase, would have their own marketing, would have their own finance, right? This is how the entire structure follows. Similarly for medicine, garments and footwear. Now, if we tend to actually address to the advantages and the disadvantages of this particular global product division structure, we have the advantages as this basically can effectively manage multiple or diverse products, right? The second one can be decisions can be made at the divisional level. The third is decisions can be taken faster because you are not required to take any kind of approvals from anybody else. You have your own marketing department, you have your own production department. So if you have any kind of feedback coming from the customers, that can be actually worked from the production department soonest possible, right? The next set of advantage which we have is the responsibility for market share and profitability is clearly defined, right? So there's no haphazard work happening that you were responsible for this and I was not responsible for this. Things like these are not there. The next advantage which we have is the firm can meet the specific needs of customers in different markets effectively. So the customization aspect can be taken into consideration, which was missing in the functional organizational structure. Now if I talk about the disadvantages of the product divisional structure, it is basically leading to unnecessary duplication of facilities, right? Because what happens is every product line is having their own production department, likewise their own marketing department, which leads to duplication of resources. The second disadvantage which we have is communication and sharing of knowledge across divisions is somewhat limited. The next disadvantage which we have is a division may sometimes focus on domestic business to a greater extent and might be neglecting the foreign subsidiaries on a whole, right? The next set of disadvantage which we intend to discuss is the conflicts between divisions may arise on sharing of common resources and allocation of common expenses, right? So basically there might be conflicts relating to the fact that I was responsible for using this particular resource for all this while, how come the other department or the other product line is using this resource now? So things like these might arise. Now these are the structures which we have covered today in this video. Rest of the structures would be covered eventually. If you have any queries, you're free to post them on the forum which we have. Thank you so much. Have a good day.